We've reached the final hour, the post-trip on Nemo Nation. Take it away, Phone Master Dre.
That I can, because we are live from the Fast Sports Studios yet again on this lovely Monday. Take it away, Jimmy.
Chris Orban joins us this morning. He's becoming a kind of a regular habit around here, hoping that he stops into the studio as much as possible. Chris has a lot to unpack over the course of the last couple of hours, so we thought we'd turn it over to you for a moment to get some of your thoughts as well, and then kind of engage in a conversation. Don't forget, you can always engage in the chat over on the Tube of You or the Book of Face or any other place where you're able to access us, and you can also give us a call at 615-292-6366. Chris, take it away.
One of my favorite things we've talked about today is the micro uncertainty versus macro uncertainty. And I thought Nancy did just a phenomenal job of describing a lot of the macro uncertainty that she's seeing, the really, really big picture and the government shutdown and things like that. But I get to work with a bunch of small carriers and owner-operators, and one thing that I'm seeing is how they're starting to deal with some of the micro uncertainty. And so I'll just tell one quick story here where I was talking to an owner-operator, and he works in the specialized space. And he said, I just don't necessarily know what I'm going to get from some of these pilot car companies that I work with. I said, well, I know that's tricky. I've talked to a lot of other carriers about this. And he says, no, wait. My solution was I started my own pilot car company. And I said, wow, that's amazing. That's kind of the traditional, American way to solve a problem. You take accountability, you go after it, and you figure it out. And he said, well, I just didn't know what I was going to get in these times with some of the people I was working with, and so I needed to hire people who would work for me. Now, again, he's a very specialized industry. He has very, very high value freight, and there was some level of being able to do that and feeling a little privileged to be able to do that, I think. But also, that was pretty amazing to me, as he's looking at this situation. And I think this is what I am seeing start to change over the last 3 to 6 months versus maybe, 9 months ago, where people are saying, look, we need to kind of take the reins on some of this uncertainty. We need to start taking action to minimize our risk and maybe do some things that are a little bit outside the box in terms of solving some of these problems we're presented with.
It's an interesting dilemma, too, because the uncertainty, there's another unword we haven't been using. The uncertainty is the result of unpredictability. I mean, the idea that when a hurricane approaches your coastline, so much the cone of uncertainty has become a very, very famous thing. The uncertainty is because at the end of the day, the models can tell you only so much. At some point, the hurricane is going to do what it's going to do, no matter how many models predict it. And in so much of what's going on here, it's not a matter of, what is it? Awful news is okay if we know it's awful and we know it's coming awful, then certain indemnifying acts can be taken to protect our investments or to protect what we've built up. What is awful is okay. I will use an example at a micro level. Let's say that you depend upon sales and sponsorships for your show like we do. If, in fact, we don't know for sure if the people that we're told are going to be onboarded, then we can't make plans. If it's a matter of, well, I thought they were going to sign this week, well, it's going to get kicked back to next week. Well, it's going to be at the end of the month. If that continues to become a pattern, there's no way you can make predictions, and you're left in what is called a holding pattern. So much of the unpredictability is about, so much of the uncertainty is the unpredictability. For instance, everybody thought, well, here we go, tariffs on China, that's life. Oh, wait, no. A deal's been worked out. Oh, wait, no. This person's angry. Oh, wait, no. Somebody ran a television commercial. Oh, wait, no. And on and on and on it goes. Make up your minds. Make a decision. Let us plan for the future.
And I think what you're calling out there is that good news can be almost as disruptive as bad news when you're not expecting it. So
Right.
are you prepared for good news? Are you ready to take advantage of a change on the positive side in the market? Well, maybe not if you've been too conservative over the last year, 2 years, whatever it is. You've got to be very careful. I mean, to your point, not knowing and not being able to predict the future events because they've never happened before is very stressful to me as a data-driven geek. So
Well, and I'll tell you something else too, and it's like, and it comes down to this as well, that, Chairman Powell has been one of the most predictable people that you could possibly imagine. When he says he's going to do something, he does something. And the reason he has done nothing is because that when people say, oh, this is coming, he's like, nope, why not? We're not sure about that. That could change in 5 minutes. Turns out he's right. Turns out that he has run the Fed based on a mercurial policy towards trade. Hot today, cold tomorrow. And he finally made the announcement. I mean, it's almost like he and the president are silently negotiating, and that Powell is basically saying, give me a consistent policy. Give me something that's consistent. If, in fact, I know you're going to stabilize tariffs, I'll drop interest rates. If I don't know what's going to happen with tariffs from week to week, I can't do anything about it because I'm not going to set off a round of hyperinflation.
Well, and that's a great point. You only have so many bullets in the gun to take action on some of these things. You've got to be very, very careful where you deploy those resources. So,
when Dean and I talk about this, we always talk about Paul Volcker and the famous, the famous, stagnation, stagflation.
Stagflation, yep.
What he did though was brilliant. He's like, okay, I'm just going to set off the biggest economic shock of all time. I'm going to raise interest rates. By the time he was done, they were like 21% at one point, and then once inflation had come down, he made the announcement. He said, the moment inflation comes down significantly, I promise you guys, I'm going to open the spigot up again. And in the blink of an eye, it did exactly what he wanted it to do. He dropped the bottom out of it, and then suddenly, 1982-83, it was morning in America. The floodgates opened because people could reinvest now. All of that stuff came into play. But right now, it's uncertain because it's unpredictable.
Yep.
One of the things, Chris, you brought up about good news can be as disruptive.
That's a great point.
Because when you hear good news, you immediately think of, am I going to lose opportunity now? So you kind of leapfrog over to your next problem, which doesn't even occur yet. You haven't even dissected the good news. And then, to Jim's point, the good news can change because somebody coughs on microphone.
Right, exactly. The good news can change, and that's exactly it. And then you get, for instance, let's say you get a really good, we keep using our own analogy because it's the one that Dave and I can relate to most. We have some really good news in regards to what's going to happen in November that we're very excited about. The problem is that good news is forcing us to scramble to make that good news happen. Because sometimes, you're right, Dave, it's an opportunity to really get your brand out, to really open up a new market. But that costs money to do those things.
It does, and now you've stepped off the cliff.
And if you don't have that money, then you're literally, what's the great thing? You're running out of gas with the spires of the Kremlin in sight.
Right.
That's the thing. That's what it kind of comes down to is, can I act upon good news? And what if you haven't indemnified yourself?
Well, and I think about, again, some of my experience in the industry where when good things have been happening, bad things have been happening, 2008 and things like that, where, companies might have overexpanded and then maybe they overcontracted. There's always this over response, it feels to me, to any kind of news, good or bad. I think that's just the human condition sometimes. I think sometimes we just want to do something so badly rather than just taking a pause, taking a moment and figuring out what does this really mean for me, for my company, for the country.
We had a chance this morning, and I was very pleased to talk with Danielle Spinelli, who, by the way, is an expert on all things fraud, the fraud girl. She's not going to defraud you. She actually is good at spotting fraud. Where I asked her, the question I asked for the drivers, and we try to think about who's listening to this show, who we want listening to this show. In order to get them to listen, you have to ask questions that are relevant to them. The question that I asked her was, is there a way to work anti-fraud efforts into your pre-trip? And I asked that because a pre-trip is part of a predictable flow. Can you, in fact, incorporate new and sometimes uncertain and unpredictable information? Can you incorporate it into your daily prep? Because the one thing I have learned way too late in life, God, I wish I knew this but didn't learn it. One of those things where is that for all of the joy of being a fox, every fox needs to learn hedgehog tactics. And the thing about a hedgehog is I often say this, is that, the things you succeed in are the things you do every day, incrementally, painfully. That it's like, I cut a new spot. Everybody should go and buy that product. I've done a new show. Why isn't everybody listening? I'm using our analogies here, of course. But the thing is, it's like, I've done a new show. It's going to take me 3 months to get traction on this. You've cut a new spot. It takes about 6 months, guys. 6 months for a spot to really land, which is why we are often loath to sign a client to a 6-month contract, because right as you're beginning to see results, they're saying, I haven't seen anything in 6 months. Why would I renew? And it's about really being able to say, but you can't make those kind of plans if you know that in 6 months the whole game's going to change. Somebody's going to walk over the Monopoly board and turn it upside down because they're losing.
I think it's a really great point, and I love your idea of working some of this fraud prevention, these good practices into the daily life of the driver, of the carrier. And I'd actually sent Danielle a message on LinkedIn saying that I was in the studio and I was going to call out my carrier portal, because in my world where we're working with small carriers, owner-operators with our TMS every day, one of the number one integration requests we get is we want to be integrated to my carrier portal so we can push a button and check the validity, check for these fraudsters that are out there right now. And it's a little bit scary, but that is one of the number one requests we're getting. So I need to reach out to her after this and make sure we get that going for our customers.
I forget. I know that there are some sports, because you're a data geek, that you love. Are you a football fan at all?
Oh boy, now I'm going to get in trouble. So I actually didn't watch any of the World Series because the Patriots are currently 7-2, and I understand I'm living in New Orleans.
There's no grief. There's no grief. Patriots are fine, by the way. There's no grief there. It's like, if you're a fan, you're a fan. I mean, that's the thing. I don't like red board players. If you were a fan of the Patriots now, it meant you've been a fan for the last couple of long-suffering years. So you're welcome to your fandom.
I've been a Patriots fan for a long time.
No, and but that's the that's really what it kind of comes down to. Football is a great analogy here because. The 25 plays I talk about all the time. The first 25 plays are scripted and trying to get a sense of what's being run. But I'm actually, we're going to have a meeting today. Once Dave gets back from a luncheon, we're going to have a meeting. And one of the things I'm going to talk to Dre and Madison about is having a big laminated piece of plastic that is the show, where it's like, that's the list, that's the checklist, that's all the stuff you have to do. And part of the challenge, I think, of being an owner-operator, of being a truck driver, is making sure that you do all the stuff you have to do comprehensively so that you can get back to the joys. And there are joys to driving. The joys of driving, that's not the job. The job is all the piddling shysta that you have to kind of do before you get to the job.
And those 25 scripted plays, as an analogy, are fantastic. So you're sitting there as a fan and you're like, my gosh, why are they doing another running play right up the middle? Well, they're gathering data. They're gathering information. They're getting experience. They're figuring out what's working, or, very interestingly, what's not working. And maybe we never see another running play up the middle again for the rest of the game. Or maybe on 3rd and 3, when we've got the chance to get the first down to win the game, that's when they pull it back out again, because they know exactly what the blocking scheme is going to be. They know exactly how that's going to go down. And that, I think, is a great analogy for what some of the small carriers and even some of the enterprise carriers are doing now. They're kind of trying to find their way. They're trying things out. They're looking at what's working, what's not working, and then they're gathering information and trying to figure out what the next step is. And now we circle all the way back to uncertainty and say, okay, well, as they're trying to do those things, they have to account for the micro and the macro changes in the world, the changes in the economy, in economic policy. It's a challenge. It is a very, very difficult challenge, and I think it can be helped with analytics and data. And so that's why that's one of the reasons why I do this. I love the data. I love the industry, and any way we can help is just incredibly powerful to me.
I'm going to give you a good example from this show itself, and I'm going to both pick on my producer and give him the highest of praise. So when we first kind of got going, Dre's a very creative man and has some really great ideas. But he'll tell you, I'd be the first, like, not interested. And my response would be like, let's run a perfect show for 3 straight weeks, and then we can have that conversation. And I said, also, I'm waiting for imaging and sound design stuff to show up. The moment it did, and the moment we got through that kind of that world where we kind of ran the basic foundational stuff, I'll give you, for instance, we figured out that if we actually pulled all of Pastor John's, every time Pastor John comes on recording, he goes, Monday, 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 and does the same thing for every day. He has, so I asked Ray to pull those and put them into the commercial breaks to pop up and through. Well, he then gets sent old jokes that we used to run on the old platform, and he comes up with the idea. He comes to me and he says, I'd like to run the jokes after Pastor John does that, and that'll split the commercials up and give you what they call a vocal break, so we don't hear Dave back to back. Well, that's the thing. Once you build the foundation together, once you got the basic first 15 down, then you can start adding 13A and 13B or 11A or 11B. And there are a lot of people, I find, who get into the owner-operator racket, Chris, who, what they do, the mistake they make is, let's say that there are 10 steps to doing this right. There are many more than that, but we're talking in simplistic terms. I know too many people that work in my field who you're in the middle of doing 3 and they're yelling at you because they want to do 8. They're yelling at you. They're like, well, why don't we do this? And it's like, I'm happy to do that once you complete 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Oh, those are pains in the ass. You want to get to 8 because 8's a blast and a half, and 8's shiny and looks like a great destination to arrive at. And a lot of people, it's like, well, why aren't we going into these new markets? It's like, dude, you haven't figured out your maintenance plan yet.
Well, one of my favorite things that I hear all the time in transportation is, everybody in transportation is the same. They're all different, right? And it's something that I really firmly believe, and I actually saw a comment about it in the YouTube chat this morning where somebody said, it's hard for me to tell you how to do something because how you do something and how you succeed is probably not how I succeeded. It might not be how I succeeded as a company driver is how I will succeed as an owner-operator. There's just a different process. But to your point, there is a framework. There are things you need to do and try as you go through this process. Follow the steps, see what's working, and then adapt from there. Then find what works well for you in this industry. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and to test results.
Absolutely.
It's testing. You go, they probe the line, probe the line, probe the line. I don't know if you saw the Notre Dame Boston College game. There was a 94-yard touchdown run where after Boston College turned the ball over at the 5-yard line, Notre Dame got it back, and you could see it. You could see what had happened was they had been studying that all game long, and what they didn't want to go for a 94-yard touchdown run. It was a run play designed for maximum blast to open up a big hole to get Notre Dame off the 5. Well, the moment the quarterback walked up to the line, it was stacked, and he's like, gotcha. If we get past that first defensive push, he's gone. And you could see him make the call and make the adjustment. And they've been probing that. And that's the thing is keep trying stuff that you're interested in trying and keep on collecting data till you make it work. And if at some point it doesn't, move on to the next thing is kind of the game. That's the micro, but that's being at the micro level. And too many people in this country right now are literally becoming constitutional authorities when they should be more worried about the Commerce Clause.
I think that's exactly right. And again, back to that whole micro versus macro uncertainty, micro versus macroeconomics. The trucks are going to move. They're going to get us food delivered to the grocery stores unless we really, really mess this whole thing up. But, so we have to remember that. And
give us a chance.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. I trust our small carriers and our drivers who work there and our owner-operators. They are our true heroes out there doing amazing stuff despite all this uncertainty, despite all the stress they're under. I truly appreciate them.
I'm going to throw this to Dave for a second because it's not been a lament, but he's saying we're having the same conversation we were having 55 years ago. Now, there are two ways you can look at that. And Dave, by the way, is simply presenting that as a fact. He's neither positive nor negative. He's simply just saying that's what it's been. That's okay because it means that we're still probing, if that makes any sense. We're still figuring out workarounds and solutions and all of that kind of stuff. I think the problem, that's why I use the term learned helplessness, not in regards to Dave, but in regards to solving these problems, is that, and I kind of throw this back at you, Dave, the idea that if we simply say, that's the way it simply is, get started. And when that happens, the English language thing, they would enforce it and send people off the road. But at some point they said, you know what, this is never going to work. And they stopped. And look what happened. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly it.
Pandora's box.
When you simply say, we can't do anything about this, so we're going to finally give up the goat here. That people don't realize that sometimes, it goes back to Mike Lucy's thing too, sometimes we don't have the data on what could happen if you don't. And when people experiment with that, that's when the problem starts. You follow me? That it's like,
we measure something that doesn't happen.
We keep on arguing about certain government programs, and we're like, these don't work. And then somebody gets elected to a state office and says, we're going to cut all those programs off. We're not going to fund rest areas anymore. They did that remember that in Kansas and Nebraska when they stopped funding rest areas, and then they found out what happened. They said, this isn't working. We're going to get rid of it. And then they got rid of it, and they had nothing to replace it. But that's the thing. Sometimes what we're engaged in is you want to have that Louis Pugh argument. You want to keep on chipping away at it because the alternative of not doing anything is even worse.
I think every generation in terms of humanity itself, learns from the previous generations and then forgets. And then we have to relearn and reforge our own paths and all of that. But we kind of leave something behind. And one of the questions, I wrote down when I heard you were coming into the studio, Chris, I wrote down a question for you. I'm going to read it. Is it time to get back to core competencies and redefine what core competencies are in transportation? Because there used to be the shipper, the carrier, the receiver, and that was our supply chain in the wonderful world of trucking for 100+ years until COVID happened. And then we realized that, no, we're just one little portion of a supply chain that is never ending. It's a Gordian knot wrapped around the entire globe, soon to be wrapped around Moon and maybe where Venus or wherever the minerals are. So in other words, what I'm getting at is, do we need to farm out more and rely more on core competencies? Can a small trucking company do everything like it used to do, and I hate to say it, 50 years ago?
I think that's a phenomenal question. And I think what I would say is, has technology enabled some of these small carriers to do more than 50 years ago? And I think the answer to that would be yes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that necessarily a good thing? I don't know. Is it good if you're operating 5-10 trucks to also have a brokerage and also have maybe a small shop or something like that? I mean, that's a lot to take on as a small carrier.
When are you not small anymore?
When you're not small. Well, I would argue that you're not small as soon as you have a truck, right? Because that is not, as I said before, that's not selling, bracelets out of your garage on Etsy or something like that. You are doing very, very high value
Forrest
work.
Lucas, you go from 0 to 60. I mean, one day you're selling out of the back of your truck a lot of oil with a special formula, and then the next moment you're on the Dave Nemo show and everybody around the country's buying you, and you got to scale up in an awful hurry. That's the other thing too, is the fact that Dean talks about this all the time. You're only as good as your partners. And I think it goes back to Dave's core competency conversation, is that I think too many people try to take on too many of those jobs too, as opposed to being like, I'm going to put down a retainer on this, and this. There's a lot of people don't have the in case switch, as it were.
Well, and Dave, to your point there, what are the true core competencies in the supply chain? Like, what do we need? And COVID, as you point out, kind of opened that Pandora's box up, and there's a lot more going on out there than we ever thought of.
No, that's okay. Mike Roth called just to say hi, just to let us know. We'll be talking with Mike sooner rather than later down the road. Big shout out. Doug Smith also wrote us all to say what a great job, not only that his boss did, but that all of us did, and to thank us all for the nice shout outs. Thank you for that, Doug. Thank you for that, Mike. We'll talk to all of them sooner rather than later. They are regularly reappearing friends of this show. But let's get back to the core competency thing here really quickly. And I think the idea is, what Dave is getting at, is that sometimes things get so complicated that we had the crazy idea we just were going to pick up stuff and bring it someplace.
Well, and as you've been doing a really great job of making it kind of personal to the operation here, I'll make it personal to my operation at JourneyTMS. We don't want to be everything to everybody. We want to have the right partners. We want to have the right experts connected to us in the right field. And I think that's the model that a lot of small carriers, a lot of owner-operators are also looking for. They don't necessarily want to do everything. In some cases, they're forced to do everything because there's a lack of opportunities, a lack of other resources, a lack of other partners to help them. But we really believe that if we can connect them to the right freight, to the right shipper, to the right other resources in the specialized world, to the right permit cars, to the right pilot cars, and the right permitting authorities and things like that. Those are things that they just don't have to worry about anymore. And so I want to leverage technology to help these smaller carriers, these folks who are doing 95% of the freight in North America. On the core competency question, I would love to have a long conversation with folks about what are the core competencies in the supply chain. What do we need to be really, really good at in order to get freight moved in North America?
Why don't we start that conversation here for the month of November? It is November the 3rd. It is the first show we are doing in the month of November. Movember as well, for health and awareness of men's health issues. why don't we have that conversation? Why don't we have an ongoing thing? Chris, if you want to throw a question, you can just send me a text, by the way, every day, and stop in anytime you want to, and we'll just put a question out there to kind of open the show, along with all the goofballs that we always open the show up with. We have a really good time in the morning here. Chris, you and I are going to take our leave here in a minute because Dave is going to be talking to Evelyn over the next half hour, which we are very excited about. Tell us a little bit about who we got coming up, Dave.
Evelyn Carrier is going to be joining us, and you may remember Evelyn was with us on the show a couple of months ago, I guess now, 2 or 3 months ago, talking about disaster relief and something that she has worked in quite a bit over in Texas. And she founded the Wharton County Recovery Team after Hurricane Harvey there in Texas, and then worked with FEMA and other groups. And we're going to talk about cotton this morning and how cotton farmers were affected, and then the whole idea of how cotton is grown and how it winds up becoming your new shirt.
Yeah, and as you can see, that's the other thing, too. We can simplify things only so much because at the end of the day, we pick up stuff and we bring it someplace else. But it goes back to our friend Dean as well, too, Chris, where it's like we're picking up stuff that we got to figure out where we can pick it up from, especially if we're our own boss, especially if we have our own authority. You know, it's one thing when the carrier is taking care of all that business for us, but when it in fact falls on our own shoulders, we got to find out where the rates are, where the action is, But the thing is, though, if you don't have the core competency mastered, it doesn't matter how many articles in The Economist you read. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter how much you tear through freight waves, how much you dig into transport topics, how much you keep up with the latest, folderol over on Landline. It don't make any difference if at the end of the day you can't run that truck properly.
Well, and as Dean would say to me right now, you got to be able to keep between the lines. So.
That's exactly. You got to, and as John would say, you got to stay in your lane.
There you go.
And that's so important. Nemo Nation continues on the other side. Dave takes it over from here. Chris, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You and I will go talk outside while Dave kind of rolls into a wonderful in-studio interview.
You want to print some money? 4,365,000 pounds of cotton are used every year to make dollar bills.